This is BTV World. I am Syed SHABAHAT, and you're watching Fault Lines. In a surprising twist of events, President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has said that he would consider pushing Sweden's inclusion into NATO alliance. Yes, Turkey, the country that has been blocking Sweden's inclusion into mainstream NATO, has formally given a green light, though the complete process will be formalized upon the endorsement of Turkey's parliament. Yet, this is a major development, and it's a major development because of several reasons. First and foremost is that Turkey is the only country in the mainstream NATO alliance that is also has a close contact, that has a close association, a close strategic partnership with Russia, perhaps the only country that has bought S-400 missiles from Russia and also has been a part of a major grain deal between Russia and Ukraine, and a deal that has come in middle of a war. Secondly, the Turkey's relationship with the remaining NATO's members, particularly United States, have been on a negative or a downward trajectory. This is a surprising development. Also, it has many skeptics that believe this deal might not go through unless United States does not give clear economic benefits to Turkey. All of this in today's program. Team Fault Lines have prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to the program.
NATO witnessed a historic day as after a year of wrangling to get Turkey sign-off on admitting Sweden into alliance membership, President Erdogan has agreed to forward the accession protocol for Sweden. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has dropped his resistance to Sweden joining the NATO alliance and will soon submit the ratification to the Turkish parliament. The Turkish leader's change of position came after a meeting with Swedish Prime Minister and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Ankara and Stockholm also agreed to create a new bilateral security compact and that Sweden will present a roadmap as the basis of its continued fight against terrorism in all its forms. A joint statement issued after three-way talks stated Turkey and Sweden would work closely on counter-terrorism, coordination, and boost trade ties. Sweden promised to actively support the efforts to reinvigorate Turkey's EU membership bid in a 7-point agreement with Ankara. NATO membership requires the approval of all the military alliance members. Turkey has held up Sweden's NATO accession since last year, accusing Stockholm of harboring terrorists. Relations were also inflamed when protesters in Sweden desecrated the Quran. Sweden has one of the most capable militaries in Europe, and its entry into NATO is touted to solidify the alliance control of the Baltic Sea.
Ladies and gentlemen, to join me on this very significant topic, I have invited Mr. Talha Kose, who is Director of CETA Foundation and is joining me from Brussels. Talha, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Talha Kose, is it right that Turkey's foreign policy is going to take an entire shift with this new government led by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan? And I'm saying new because many of the cabinet members have already been changed.
I think it's not a major transformation, but we know that in the last almost a decade, Turkey's relations with the West, US, EU has deteriorated. So despite we are a member of NATO and despite we have membership process with EU, we had significant political, economic, and foreign policy challenges with all these actors. So this was a kind of anomaly. So this new, I think, orientation to normalize relations is return to a more balanced approach to relations with the West. So I consider this not a complete shift, complete change, but a beginning of a process of normalization with our Western counterparts. And I don't expect that things will go back to maybe 20 years ago, where the only option in Turkish foreign policy was Western orientation. Right now, we have a much more balanced approach in foreign policy.
But Russia has been counting a lot on Turkey's support. And it is also a fact that without Turkey being a mediator, this Green Deal that is so heavily benefiting Europe would not have been possible. How do you believe Russia will be looking into these developments?
I think Turkish-Russian relations has a strong foundation that has been established in the last several years. There's a strong trust between two presidents, and there's an ongoing process of cooperation in economy, tourism, and in Syria and a couple of other places. So yes, I mean, there is a disagreement on the Ukraine file. There is a disagreement on a couple of issues like Libya and Syria, but they can sort out their differences through diplomatic channels. So the distinction here is that, and also grain deal is also in favor of Russia in terms of their sales of fertilizers and grains. So, and also the increase in the prices of the grain is also affecting negatively some relatively poorer countries in Asia and Africa. So this is also Russian policy to also balance the prices of the grain, which would also not polarize these countries' relations with Russia. So it serves the interests of both Russia and Turkey and the rest of the world. So I think Russia will probably understand that Turkey is a member of NATO, has certain commitments to NATO, but it will not change foreign policy orientations overnight. Turkey will rather try to play more mediator role or much more balanced role that would serve the interest of the region, interest of the peace. So what is different here is, I think, a further escalation in the situation in the Black Sea does not serve the interest of Turkey. Of course, it is clear that Turkey does not accept the annexation of Crimea and annexation of the Donbas region, and makes this clearly in the old official documents, but this does not necessarily prevent Turkey's cooperation with Russia in certain issues. So this idea of compartmentalization and working on the shared files, I think, is a functioning strategy, and I think Turkey will continue this strategy.
But Mr. Kose, don't you think Russia would be affected by this deal?
I think some of these cooperation will continue. I think Turkey is only in favor of UN sanctions. So, and Turkey is not also pursuing the EU sanctions. There is space for Russian citizens in Turkey, and economic cooperation continues. There is even a proposal from the Russian side on the sales of energy through Turkey, and Russian side also continue their investment in nuclear plants in Turkey. So these are very strong relations, and I don't think Turkey is. And the other thing is, Turkey also cooperates with Ukraine on the issues of military technology. So all these things go together. I don't think these recent, policy efforts are a major shift in the. If there are certain restrictions, further restrictions and sanctions against Russia from the Turkish side, we can understand that that's a major change. But some minimal change in the discourse and some further cooperation with the NATO partners is not a major shift in Turkey's balanced foreign policy vis-à-vis the Russian side.
Now let's talk about Sweden for a while. What benefits Sweden is going to reap? Because apparently Sweden does not face any direct threats from Russia, threats of invasion, because Russia is so deeply occupied with Ukraine. We cannot foresee Russia coming out of Ukraine and expanding this war into other parts of Europe. So what are the reservations for Sweden at the moment?
I think they are not in a desperate situation, but they are, dragged to that direction. I think that's the kind of. So they have been pursuing a policy of neutrality for 200 years. So they benefited all from this neutrality economically, and they are not well prepared for, I think, any military engagement. So one of the weaknesses of Sweden is that they have very limited armed forces. They are not well prepared for any military activity, and their society is, lacking this idea of challenging the military confrontations. I think it would be, it would be a good idea to become member of NATO under these circumstances where Sweden is not ready. So the other issue, maybe in the coming years, there may be further conflicts, further confrontations between Russia and Sweden over the Arctic or the Baltic Sea. So in those issues, I think Sweden will be much more prepared to challenge the Russian threat under these circumstances. So it is clear that Sweden is not well prepared to deal with military challenges, especially a country, a power like Russia. And in the future, there may be tensions in Baltic and the Arctic, and Sweden is not militarily ready for addressing those challenges. So it's a good idea for Sweden to be member of such a strong alliance, but at the same time, it would bring significant responsibilities for Sweden. So I think there is still some disagreements among the Swedish public about whether to become member of NATO or not. So for the time being, especially after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, this popularity of NATO has increased. But if the war ends, probably it will go to the normal situation. So I think that's why Europe and United States are rushing Sweden to become member as soon as possible.
When we spoke last time, Talha Kose, about the issue of Sweden and Turkey, you told us, maybe 8 months ago, you told us that YPG and other terrorist outfits have sought refuge in Sweden, which is one of the major concerns of Turkey as government. Perhaps the only reason you had identified that Turkey has not been very flexible in this process. Have these issues been formally addressed as yet?
I think many of these mentioned activists are very much connected with the terrorist groups PKK and YPG. So they have political, they are spreading the political propaganda of this organization. They have networks to collect money and send to both the organization in Syria and in Turkey. So this is a major concern, and they are very well established in Sweden for the last 4 decades. So I think Sweden is one of the places where PKK and affiliate organizations and also FETÖ are very well organized, and I think they also find some support from the government side. I think this is a major challenge because Sweden also has so much opportunities in terms of press, in terms of publicity, in terms of political influence through EU and other international institutions. So it is very significant for Turkey to cut this connection between this organization and the Swedish government, as well as preventing some of these activities like collecting money, propagating through certain TV stations, web channels. So I think it will be very useful for Turkish government to deal with these issues, but it would be too optimistic to expect these organizations to evaporate overnight. So I think they will try other means to continue their activities. That's why this agreement will be a challenge for Turkey, and it will also be a challenge for any sincere Swedish government who want to address these terror threats.
Thank you very much, Talha Kause, for being guest in our program.
You are well welcome. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, now moving toward the second topic of today's show is Pakistan's deal with International Monetary Fund. Now, in a surprising twist of events, IMF, that was demanding Pakistan to take extreme budgetary and fiscal measures to put its economy straight, has allowed Pakistan another $3 billion of a bailout program. This $3 billion of program is quite a breathing space because it allows Pakistan to take further loans from other countries, the friendly nations who have been asking Pakistan to get back into a mainstream IMF program before getting some further support. Out of it, $1.2 billion from IMF have to be liquidated right away, whereas Saudi Arabia and UAE have collectively also contributed another $3 billion for Pakistan. What exactly does it mean? Is it going to pick Pakistan out or pull Pakistan out of the current economic and financial quagmire? To speak about this, I have requested Mr. Mehtab Haider, Mehtab is senior staff reporter for the News International, a reputable journalist covering this issue. Mehtab, thank you very much for being a guest in today's program. Tell our viewers about this current IMF arrangement that they have with government of Pakistan. Hasn't it surprised many, because we were not expecting IMF to sign a new contract with Pakistan?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much for inviting me. Actually, the last IMF program, which met with failure under the Extended Fund Facility, was expiring on June 30, 2023. And Pakistan and IMF were struggling to strike a staff level agreement since last 9 months. It was not sufficient time to conclude the ninth review. So it was not possible to conclude the 10th and 11th review. And there was an option between IMF and Pakistan to conclude only the ninth review, and it could only be provided $1.2 billion. So at that point of time, when there was not sufficient time, Prime Minister of Pakistan intervened, and both Prime Minister and IMF's MD agreed that Pakistan and IMF technical teams should work out a feasible plan. So two options were considered. One was that this extended fund facility program should be revived, and it could only provide $1.2 billion. But keeping in view the political transition in Pakistan, IMF agreed to provide a fresh 9-month standby arrangement program for providing $3 billion. So this program was devised keeping in view the political transition. So it was not in sight, you are absolutely right, but there was not sufficient time. So this option was considered, and both Pakistan and IMF agreed that this political transition should also be smoothened, and this arrangement was ultimately finalized. And you have seen that 2 days yesterday, the IMF also approved the standby arrangement and also disbursed the first installment of $1.2 billion.
Mehtab sir, are there some new conditions or some new strings attached to this program? And also help us to understand why Prime Minister looks so concerned toward this new deal. He has said that publicly that it is nothing to cherish or to celebrate.
Absolutely right. Pakistan's economy is passing through a difficult situation. In this ongoing financial year, we are bound to provide $25 billion in shape of debt repayments. And if there is a current account deficit of $6 to $7 billion, it means that Pakistan requires at least $30 to $32 billion. Now, with this IMF program, there are 4 major conditions which mentioned by the IMF itself. First of all, Pakistan will have to implement the announced budget which Parliament recently approved. And one of the conditions would be there wouldn't be any supplementary grant allowed in this financial year. Technical supplementary grant will be allowed. Technical supplementary grant means that without increasing the overall size of the budget, the ministries can readjust their allocation. If a ministry is saving amount, it can be diverted to another ministry. So technical supplementary grant will be allowed, but there will be no permission for any additional funding which the Parliament didn't approve. It would be the first condition. The second condition would be the market-based exchange rate. There wouldn't be any distortion or any trying to manage the exchange rate artificially. The third is tightening of monetary policy. As you know, inflation, the IMF has projected 25.9% inflation number, CPI based headline inflation, against the official target of 21%. Because IMF thinks that they have included electricity hike in electricity tariff and gas tariff into their model. So there are expectations that there will be hike in the inflation. So the discount rate will also be tightened, keeping in view the higher inflation. And fourth one is undertaking the structural reforms, especially the public sector enterprises. The cash bleeding public sector enterprises would be the one of the condition, and the government will of course pursue outsourcing of airports and take some other measures to plug these leakages.
And Mehtab Sahab, are you also of the opinion, like many economists that have participated in our show, that the liquidity situation, particularly the devaluation of currency, could have gone completely out of hand? Would IMF's bailout would not have reached Pakistan in time?
Of course, there was no other option but to get endorsement of the IMF program. We have seen in Sri Lanka that first they faced a default, but ultimately they would have no other option but to enter into the fresh IMF program. So it was the right decision that the government went into the IMF program, because it would help Islamabad to overcome the default or eruption of any major balance of payment crisis. In the first half, in the first half of ongoing financial year from July to December, Pakistan will have to repay $10.3 billion. If we are getting rollover from our bilateral friends, especially from China and from Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Pakistan needs $6 billion repayments on its external account. You have seen that after the IMF program, we have secured $2 billion additional deposit from Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, $1 billion from UAE, and $1.2 billion from as a first installment from the IMF. So in last 3-4 days, Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves have gone up $4.2 billion. So it will help to curtail inflationary pressure, but keeping in view the administrative prices which we have to increase, or for instance, if the petroleum prices increased in the international market, it would be passed on to the consumers. And we have also agreed with the IMF to increase the petroleum development levy from rupees 50 per litre to 55 per litre. We have already increased on petrol, but we didn't increase on diesel. So it would also go up. So keeping in view electricity prices, gas prices and fuel prices, the IMF has already projected higher inflation than the official projection. IMF has projected that Pakistan's average inflationary pressure will be 26% against the official target of 21%. So keeping in view this higher inflationary pressures, headline inflation, we should also expect that this tight monetary policy will continue to persist at least for coming 3 to 6 months period.
Mehtab Sahab, many of the critics say that institutions like IMF put conditions to economies like Pakistan that actually further deteriorate the economic situation. By that I mean that putting more taxes to the people already in the tax net, by putting more taxes on the corporations that are already under immense debt of inflation, immense burden of inflation, and making loans more expensive, actually stops the industrial cycle altogether. And this technically deteriorates the situation further instead of improving it. Don't you believe that the similar conditions attached with this program as well are going to cause more chaos in Pakistan?
You are absolutely right. IMF is known for a prescription, one shoe fits for all policy. But being a devil's advocate, actually the problem is IMF is known for one shoe fits for all policy. IMF prescription is always to stabilize the economy. IMF is not meant to promote growth. First of all, we will have to stabilize the economy because we are facing stagflation. Stagflation means low growth, higher inflation, and especially the food inflation. Food inflation impedes the poorest of the poor. So, first of all, under the IMF program, we have averted default. So, first of all, we will have to stabilize the economy, and when the economy will be stabilized, then we can pursue the path of growth. But you are absolutely right that in the short term, at least for next 6 to 9 months, we will have to stabilize the economy. And one thing I want to add, after graduation of this program successfully, which will be implemented by the three different governments, this one led by the PDM, they have signed the IMF program and obtained $1.2 billion. But the next two reviews are expected to be done by the caretaker setup and then by those who will come into the power after winning the next elections. If political transition smoothly continues or is smoothly done. So this program is designed keeping in view the political transition of Pakistan. But after graduating this program after 9 months, there will be no other option but to get a fresh medium term 3 to 4 years IMF program, because in next 3 to 4 years Pakistan requires more than $90 billion to keep its economy afloat. So without IMF stamped approval, we will not be able to manage this kind of increased foreign exchange requirements to ensure our debt repayments on time and also to meet the current account deficit requirements. Current account deficit means that our economy also moves on the path of trajectory of growth, because our manufacturing sector heavily relies on import. So there is a need to pursue the import substitution policy as well as industrialization within Pakistan to move forward towards the growth trajectory.
And lastly, since you cover Ministry of Finance from quite close, tell us how would the government of Pakistan take this forth? Do you believe they are going to make some major changes in the current economic policies, as this program has an age of 9 to 10 months?
I think this is the most critical question you have asked. It is not the only finance ministry, it is the whole government, including Prime Minister, including Ministry of Finance, including Ministry of Commerce, including Ministry of Development, Ministry of Economic Affairs, FBR, State Bank of Pakistan. We need a coherent policies. And first of all, we should declare an emergency for increasing export. And for increasing export, we will have to fix our taxation system, we will have to fix the cash bleeding power sector. So my suggestion would be declare an emergency for increasing exports, and exports. Because without generating dollar inflows, non-debt creating dollar inflows is the requirement of the day. So we will have to pursue exports, and second, energy sector would be the major problem. We will have to fix it. And thirdly, we will have to fix the broadening of tax base, because how much time we will only get the taxes from those who are already in the tax net. We will have to broaden the tax base. There is no other solution. Pakistan is one of the lowest country in terms of tax to GDP ratio. We will have to increase it. if that is the issue of survival of this country. Because how long we will continue to get loans to meet our basic requirements? It wouldn't happen lost, and we will have to integrate with the regional countries to increase exports. But for increasing exports, we will have to manufacture something exportable surplus. When the exportable surplus will be available, then we will be able to increase our exports or jump our exports. Otherwise, there will be no solution.
Thank you very much, Mahtab Haider, for being guest in our program today. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with second segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The third topic of today's program is about European Parliament that has passed a resolution condemning violence and human rights situation in India. The problem with India is that the religious minorities have been facing the brunt of a Hindutva regime led by Narendra Modi, which has not only made the life of Muslims, Christians, and Sikhs much difficult, but also the Dalits, who are Hindus but from lower caste in the given caste system that India believes in, the lives have become very difficult. Recently, a video was aired on a social media platform where a high caste Brahmin was urinating on a low caste Dalit, and the Dalit boy was sitting helpless, and this has caused frustration and anger in many parts of the world. European Parliament has also further said that the trade relationship and other partnerships with India should be linked with the human rights situation inside Narendra Modi's India. To talk about this very significant issue, I've requested Syed Muhammad Ali, but before Muhammad Ali comes into the program, Team Fault Lines have prepared a package.
India is undergoing a transformation from a relatively secular state into a Hindutva-inspired Rashtra under the watchful eye of the ruling BJP. Under the poisonous Hindutva ideology, non-Hindus are relegated to a subhuman existence in the Rashtra. The Indian state's blatant disregard for human rights is most painfully evident in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where it continues to treat the local population like a conquered people. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, a bipartisan panel with a congressional mandate, designated India as country of particular concern in its 2023 report. The intolerance towards minorities is contributing to the Manipur violence, where murder and mayhem is tearing apart the Indian state. The European Union Parliament has urged India to end violence and protect minorities in the country's northeastern Manipur state, criticizing nationalistic rhetoric adding to tensions. The Manipur government has also shut down internet connection and severely hindered reporting by the media, while security forces have been implicated in the recent killings. The politically motivated divisive policies are promoting Hindu majoritarianism in India, which is tearing the Indian states apart. International community should systematically and publicly raise human rights concerns with India, notably on freedom of expression, religion, and shrinking space of civil society at the highest level.
As I said earlier, Syed Muhammad Ali is my guest for this part of the program. Ali, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ali, why every independent observer, every independent group, every independent human rights organization is against the human rights situation in India? Why everyone has concerns about the dismal state of affairs with regards to the minorities' life in India?
I think there are three reasons for that. Because, the entire grand strategy in the information domain by India is based on exploiting and marginalizing the minorities domestically, while internationally presenting it based on its economic potential and its relevance for the emerging changes in the world order for the status quo world power. However, the reason why it is reluctant to allow the international observers and media to see the reality of India is primarily because the reality is very bitter. It is very sobering, and it is not going to go down well with the international community. And it is not just the observers. You would recall recently there was a crackdown on the BBC offices inside India. And so it's not just Kashmir, where international observers and international media is denied access. But the reality is so sobering and so unfortunate that they make deliberate efforts to hide it from all international observers and media as part of their policy.
Ali, why the hate crimes against religious minorities are on the rise, despite the fact that Narendra Modi is quite well footed in his political camp? We have seen him only strengthening over a period of time as a politician. And also tell me, is this a strategy of BJP to garner further support from their religious majority?
I think I'll quickly try to deconstruct this uh, popular perception of Mr. Modi's rising popularity. I believe that Mr. Modi has a niche following within the extremist right-wing Hindutva following constituency, which is loyal and which is emotionally and ideologically committed to the Hindutva ideology. It is not that it is widespread popularity within all segments of society. If that was the case, then obviously the sort of treatment which is meted out to the Dalits, to the Christians, to the Muslims, and other low caste Hindus would obviously not, in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-class society, you can't expect Mr. Modi and Hindutva to be popular. So I don't believe that he's widely popular. However, he exploits, marginalizes, and cracks down on the minorities, and he gains that ensures his loyalty within his niche ideological and emotional follower.
And Ali, also Sikhs are demanding their separate homeland. They're demanding free Rajasthan. Free Khalistan. And now this Khalistan movement is taking momentum. We have seen Sikhs from around the world voting for an independent Khalistan. What's the reason? Is it also the same reason that the problems faced by Muslims and Christians are also faced by Sikhs in the world's largest democracy?
I think the Sikh history is, the best kept secret from the world. It is very important that both the Sikhs and the international community need to dispassionately read their history. I think they have been exploited by the Hindu extremist elite for a very long time, based on creating misperceptions against the Muslims, particularly during the partition of South Asia as well. And more recently, like several other communities, Shabahat, the Sikhs have also realized that they've been taken in for a ride. They've been exploited and used against Muslims, and not given their due share in opportunity, recognition, reward, and respect within the society. And hence this realization is reflected in the growing awareness of the Sikh community around the world. And you see it whether it's North America, whether it's Canada, whether it's Australia, whether it is United Kingdom. I think all over the world, the Sikhs have risen. And I don't think, considering their strategic character, they can be browbeaten and subdued despite the best possible efforts of the Modi regime.
Ali, you said earlier while responding to my perhaps first question that BJP is not as popular as we believe they are. Narendra Modi's popularity, you believe, is also not as projected. But why the opposition parties have not been able to capitalize on this momentum that he's building against the minorities? Why don't the other parties, or perhaps Congress, that the largest party in the opposition is not making a good use of the situation? What can be the reason behind it?
I think that's a very apt observation, Shabahat, because this clearly exposes that despite a liberal, pro-West, moderate impression given by the opposition parties such as Aam Aadmi Party, such as the Communist Party, such as the Congress Party, it is an unfortunate reality that their ability to promote and protect democratic norms and liberal values is, a manifested failure. And in a true democracy, you would expect the liberal left to politically, ideologically, and culturally contest the rise of a divisive, intolerant, extremist Hindutva ideology. But that is conspicuous by absence. And that clearly exposes that in their hearts of hearts, they present a soft face in order to look moderate, in order to look diverse, in order to look democratic. But in their heart of heart, they look the other way when the Muslims in Kashmir are being oppressed or being blinded, when Christians and Dalits and Sikhs are being marginalized and exploited. So you practically see it as a bipartisan agenda. Whether, although what the left says is different from what the right does, but in reality, the policies and the behavior towards the minorities is perhaps no different.
Thank you very much, Syed Muhammad Ali, for being guest in our program.
Always a pleasure, Shabahat. Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, the last topic of our program is about Wagner Group. Now, we know that in June, which is last month, Wagner Group, which is an independent military contractor used by Russia on many battlefields, be it operations inside Syria, be it other engagements in other parts of Africa, or the mainstream war, the battle they are fighting in Ukraine, Wagners have played a very important role. Wagner Group went on a mutiny. They attacked several government offices, killed pilots, and then started marching toward Moscow last month when they were only 20 or 24 kilometers away from Moscow. Apparently, President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, came into the picture. He spoke with Wagner's head, and this mutiny ended. We're also told that Wagners are now operating from Belarus. Their forces are shifted in Belarus. Some of them have joined the regular mainstream army. What exactly is happening? To talk about this, I have requested Lucas Weber, who is co-owner of Militant Wire Network. Lucas, thank you very much for being guest in our program today. Tell us, what is the status of Wagner Group today, as of now when we speak?
Thank you for having me on the show. Russia's Wagner Group is a semi-state organization that's often categorized as a private military company. Wagner is directly under the command of the Kremlin. However, it has some degree of latitude and autonomy. One of Wagner's key functions was to be a force multiplier for separatist forces in the Donbass following the 2014 post-Maidan conflict. Wagner also has been used in Syria, in Ukraine, in various African countries such as Mozambique, which it has now departed from. It's active in Mali. There are reports it is active in Burkina Faso, and it is also operating in the Central African Republic. Now, after the mutiny, a lot of speculation and reports have come out about what is going to happen to the Wagner Group. But it seems that negotiations have been completed and that Wagner will resettle alongside its leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, in Belarus. And it's abroad, it continues to operate in Africa. Just recently, the Central African Republic government gave awards to Wagner fighters to show their appreciation of their work. However, Wagner was operating in the Donbass, which was not part of Russia until it was annexed. And now that it has been brought into Russian territory legally under a decree proposed by Vladimir Putin, he has come out and said that Wagner is violating the law and has no grounds to operate inside Russia, and he's referring to the oblasts that have been incorporated into Russia. So now he is trying to contain the group following the mutiny and make sure that they cannot repeat another insurrection.
And what do we know about the mystery of Wagners running away from the battlefield only 24 kilometers away from Moscow? This is perhaps the largest penetration any military could ever have, marching toward Moscow. We have not known the exact reasons why did the leader of Wagner went away. So what do we know of it?
The Wagner group really gained increased notoriety during the battle for Bakhmut, which was ultimately successful and notably boosted the profile of the organization and its leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Now, during the battle for Bakhmut, Prigozhin was quite boisterous in voicing his discontent with Russian military leadership and even taking subtle jabs at the political leadership. And once the battle for Bakhmut was completed, Wagner fighters were removed from the arena and into staging areas in the back. And it was here where they were supposed to rest, refit, and get ready to enter back into the conflict on August 5th. However, the Russian Ministry of Defense ordered all volunteer units and private military companies to sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense and integrate them under the control of the Russian military. Yevgeny Prigozhin, Wagner's leader, was quite concerned that he was going to lose control, or at least his power would be undermined with this new policy. So it appears that the conflict between Wagner Group's leadership and the Russian Ministry of Defense came to a head, and Prigozhin saw the mutiny as a way to gain leverage and keep control over his organization. So when they entered Russia, they entered the Rostov area and then proceeded to Moscow. However, the mutiny was stopped because Russia amassed forces and sent them to the Rostov area, and also were planning defenses to attack and fend off the mutiny that was headed for Moscow if need be. Now, it seems that Prigozhin and his men got cold feet when they were on their way to Moscow because they realized that they were outnumbered and they were at a firepower disadvantage. And it seems both sides wanted to avoid bloodshed. So this is where Belarus's leader, Lukashenko, came in and acted as a mediator to put an end to the insurrection and bring the two sides to some kind of agreement.
But Belarus, Lukashenko's role has been quite skeptical. There are many who believe that his role is not as we have been told. What do you believe Lukashenko's role was in this entire process?
According to media reports and statements by both Wagner and the Russian government, Belarus's leader Lukashenko played a key role in the negotiations to stop the mutiny and have the two sides come to terms. Belarus has grown much closer to Russia since the attempted 2020 color revolution, which was directly or indirectly backed by the US and the West. Belarus was also an important staging ground prior to the invasion and now during the war. It houses Russian military assets, Air Force assets, and now nuclear weapons. And it now appears that Wagner and Prigozhin will be stationed in Belarus, where they will help train territorial defense forces to protect Belarus's border and perform other tasks to strengthen the country's military. This benefits both Russia and the Wagner Group, since a close ally will become more secure and Wagner will be able to continue its operations.
But what can be the fallout for Russia for all of this, what has happened? Don't you believe that Wagner's dismantling would be a major problem? It will create a vacuum which perhaps Moscow might not be able to bridge. What do you think?
Wagner was instrumental in taking the important strategic city of Bakhmut. The group has proven to be a highly capable assault force. Now, after negotiations, some Wagner personnel have signed contracts to be integrated into the regular Russian military, while many others have followed Prigozhin to Belarus. If Wagner does not reach an agreement to re-enter the fight in Ukraine, this could potentially somewhat undermine Russia's offensive capabilities going forward as it seeks to take the remaining territory of the Donbass. However, the Russian military itself remains very capable, and it's unclear how much of an impact this would have. At least for now, Wagner continues to operate in Syria, in Mali, in the Central African Republic, and elsewhere. So while it seems that Putin is seeking to defang and scale down Wagner to make sure that they do not have the capabilities to launch another mutiny, Wagner's international operations continue for the time being.
I was reading a news, Lucas, which says CIA and Russian intelligence have also got into contact. What for? What do you believe can be the agenda of this cooperation? Because apparently these are two rival sides in the battle.
Despite the two parties being adversaries, the US and Russia have maintained back-channel communications throughout the duration of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the war that is dragging out. The US wanted to convey to the Russians that American intelligence had no hand in supporting or even placing the idea in Prigozhin's head to launch the Wagner mutiny into Russia. Now, while the U.S. is fighting a proxy war against Russia and Ukraine, the U.S. is trying to manage escalation. And this is because the nuclear threat, while it remains unlikely that it will manifest, it looms large over the conflict. And the U.S. and the Russians both have an interest in making sure that this some kind of nuclear catastrophe does not occur.
Thank you very much, Lucas Babu, for being guest in our program. Ladies and gentlemen, these were the major events that have caught attention of the international media in the week, which is ending tonight. We'll join you next week with another program covering the major fault lines from around the world. And until then, Allah Hafiz.